There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
It's Sunday evening or whenever it is you're watching this. Tonight was a show we were actually going to do last week with student Dr. Ben, but he did just start right before, a couple days before Sunday last week. He had started his internal medicine rotation because he is a medical student and a very, very good one at that. So it will welcome student Dr. Ben. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Yeah, so like Momma Atheist, I love that name, by the way.
Yeah.
Mentioned that I'm a medical student. I'm in my third year of medical school, and I have puberty voice because I'm trans. I'm on my first month on T officially, so I'm not sick, I promise. This is just how my voice sounds now, and we're gonna live with it. But anyway, I'm on the YouTubes. I do a channel called Student Dr. Ben, where I talk about biological sex, and I talk about transgender issues in medicine, other things related to reducing stigma in the medical field, and then also recently started debunking fake science on the internet because people love that. I also do streams on Twitch where I just play The Sims 4 and I go through medical cases, and sometimes I have beers and bros with B No Just B. We do lots of fun stuff on that Twitch. So if you like the more goofy side of media, that's probably going to be where you want to go. I'm also on Twitter at StudentDocBen, and I'm kind of an asshole on Twitter. So
Oh, come on. All of Ben's stuff is in the description, but yeah, I haven't yet had a chance to watch your medical diagnosis things on Twitch, and I'm really excited for that. So that sounds like a lot of fun.
They're kind of goofy, but I do let my audience jump in. Like I ask the audience what you all want to do, and sometimes I pick on a person in the audience and make you do the case for me, and I just sit back and watch with anxiety as you make me do things I would never do in real life. So it can be kind of fun.
And how long? I've known you a little over a month. I met you a little over a month ago. How long has it been since you started your channel?
I started my channel in March, so it's been really, really new.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of
That's
like
super
I was
new.
that's super new, but I was in my second year of medical school, and I just noticed a lot of people online talking about gender, and especially talking about biological sex that really didn't know anything about it. And I would be in people's live chats, like for their call-in shows and stuff, and I'd be like, why don't people understand embryology? Why don't people go learn about embryology? And I was like, wait, hold on a sec. Like I know this stuff. Maybe I can communicate it, so then I don't get frustrated and wish people studied it.
Yeah.
So like it's not their fault all the time. Like if they didn't study a field that like they don't have expertise in, maybe they just need to be educated on it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that.
There's a little bit of people need to kind of stay in their lane too. There's so many people that, have no actual education or real knowledge on the subject, but feel the need to spread their misinformation like wildfire because that's what they believe full, like the anti-vaxxers or whatever it is. That's one of the reasons I do this is my fight against anti-science, except mine leans more toward, climate than yours is very cool because you have the little medical field. I really like that. Do you find yourself having to argue with anti-vaxxers a lot too?
Oh, all the time. My family are anti-vaxxers, in fact. So
My family are climate deniers.
Yeah, mine are also climate deniers. So actually, they're a little bit better about the climate issues than they are about the vaccine stuff, because at least like while they don't necessarily agree with climate change, at least my mom like takes steps to like be more sustainable. So at least like, sure, you might not be totally correct on things, but at least you're trying in that sense. Whereas my family is very actively anti-vax and very vocally anti-vax, which is kind of frustrating. I find that I do have to have a little bit of a boundary with my family though, because as much as I want to argue with them, I just like sometimes need to have a boundary with them on that, because I know they're not going to listen to me. Like family is less likely to listen to you than anybody else in the world. So like if anyone is to reach them on vaccine issues, it's not going to be me. It's going to be somebody else. So I just kind of draw up that boundary with them there.
Yeah, I think some people just can't be reached. Like when it comes to my mother, she will literally just walk away if you try to bring up something she doesn't like, try to argue a point that she doesn't believe in, and that's very difficult. Some people just draw that line and won't listen at all. So, but my friend Brian Brainbug and I had did a show last year with I can't remember his name right now. I will remember, I swear to God, with a biologist talking about the science of transgenderism. Being able to, I know that that's not my field of expertise at all. So being able to sit down and talk with him, it was really cool to listen to and have actual science that backed up, the reality of what is transgenderism and not the kind of horrible, hateful turf-centric bullshit you find on everywhere basically nowadays. That must be very difficult.
Yeah, it can be. And being in medicine is interesting because like we're starting to be more open as trans providers, but it's still difficult. I think I'm the only trans person that I know of at my medical school. And so I'm going through things on my own, like, and my school's trying to adapt as we go, but I have to deal with them being incredibly frustrating sometimes. Like, when I was about to start my rotations, like some of the gynecology rotations won't allow for male medical students. And so for some reason, they didn't have my gender in the system. Like they just didn't put one in because previously I had asked them to not put Miss on any of my documents because like I'm not comfortable calling me Miss. And so they just took it off. And so I guess in taking that off, they took off my gender completely. And so I got an email from one of our like clinical directors asking like what my gender is because they need to report it for rotations. And I'm just like, I don't get why I have to report that at all. Like whatever my gender is, because like my whatever's in my pants is not relevant to me being a practitioner at all. Like I don't need to disclose that. So it was a bit weird.
That really
Hopefully,
surprises me too, because I've always seen so many more men in gynecology and obstetrics than women. So for them to say, only women can be in these classes, that's interesting. I know you were worried when you first started because you were in a Catholic hospital as well. As your fear been abated a little bit, or have you run into any issues with that at all?
Yeah, it's been mostly okay, which
Good.
I've been surprised about. The only time, there was one day this past week where I was misgendered like 3 times. But I realized if I introduce myself, I'm not going to be misgendered because I walk in the room, I'd say that I'm Ben and people associate Ben with being male.
Yeah.
So if I introduce myself that way, they've been gendering me appropriately. Whereas like the cases where I have been misgendered, they were when I didn't introduce myself. So at least like, granted, I would like people to be more cognizant of like asking pronoun and I wear my pronouns on my coat, but still at least I have a way to mitigate the situation and to take control of that.
Yeah.
So,
and you don't find people aren't doing it in a misgendering you in a mean way either, doing it on purpose to hurt you at work. Good.
No,
because that would be, can imagine working someplace and having people do that to you. That would be pretty awful. Sorry that you ever have to deal with that. So the discussion today, we were, I don't even remember whose channel we were on a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the jar of baby brains, and then that came into, well, let's have a discussion about death. And so how do you want to start there?
It's such a complicated, well, it's not even a complicated topic. It's just a very taboo topic in a lot of our society. And I think we're kind of, there's a lot to talk about with it, but the fact that it's so taboo is wild, and it's very psychologically damaging to people. And I guess I was kind of going to share my experience with becoming okay with being around death and how I had to learn to handle it, because death for me is something that ultimately caused my deconversion. It wasn't the final straw, but it was the most important one. I think it's the one that actually got me to question. And so when I was in undergrad, I had an anatomy class where we actually did have cadavers, and not a lot of undergrad institutions have cadavers in their anatomy labs, but we did. And that was pretty cool. We didn't actually dissect them ourselves. They were prosected for us, and then we just used them in class. And I do know that was difficult for me the first time I was in that room with a cadaver, just because it's weird. It's the first time you go into a room and there's like metal tables in the back, and it just hits you. You're like, there are dead people in this room right now.
Yeah.
And you just knew that. And there was something weird. And it was, that particular experience was a bit more difficult just because my grandmother passed away literally 2 weeks before I started that class. And so the same age, and like, it just, that was a little close to home at that point, but that was a time I kind of was able to get over it, because you know nothing about these people in the cadaver lab. Like, their bodies that have been donated to you, most of the time they were very old. They died of some medical reason. I mean, a lot of them, like, I think one of ours was in her 90s or something. So it's not very hard to think that this person had a very long life. They got to do a lot of things. Like, it's not anything shocking that they died at 94. So you can kind of easily get over that. And you have nothing, like, you don't have a story to connect to this person. It's just, you can be very clinical. You can separate yourself from what's in front of you. But the difference was, my friend was taking a forensic chemistry class, and I wasn't even in the class, but my friend was on good terms with the professor and knew that I wanted to go into medicine. And so I was like, hey, we're doing a field trip to go to the coroner's office for the county, and we're going to go watch an autopsy and then like go learn about the forensic lab and all the stuff that they do. And so I was like, sure, yeah, like, I've been in a cadaver lab before, like, I've been around bodies. It shouldn't be a big deal. It should be a good experience. And so I went with them, and it was not the same at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Like, the context is very different. Like, you
Mhm.
walk in and you're in a big autopsy morgue, and there were 3 bodies in the room, and they're all in the position that they died in. And like, 2 of them were really young. And the one that we watched the autopsy on, like, she was young. She was 19, I believe.
Wow. What was
And
the
that
cause
was
of death?
heroin overdose.
Okay. At least it wasn't like something super bloody. Not that that's not terrible.
Yeah.
Was this where you also how this conversation started off, the baby brains? Was this the same
Yeah. Yeah,
incident?
the same place.
Do you want to
Yep.
explain that so people know what that means?
Yeah, so where the baby brains came from. Anytime there is a suspected homicide, you have to save all of the specimens just in case it goes back to court. And anytime that a child dies, there has to be a forensic investigation, just because you never know. And kids can't really advocate for themselves. Like, it's very hard to get evidence for that. And anytime a kid dies, like, outside of a hospital, you need to be worried about something tragic. So so they had buckets of baby brains, like literal buckets in the freezer. And that was just a weird experience to see. But that's where we get the baby brains.
When you explain it makes sense. But I can't, because we talked about the idea of the good death, which is something Caitlin Doty, the Ask Mortician lady, who's like my favorite channel, speaks a lot about being able to, cut away the stigma and talk about death. And, because it is kind of important. It is important for us to be able to acknowledge that death is a part of life, and that this is something that, it needs to be stopped. It needs to stop being swept under the rug and being such a taboo subject. But as much as like I have tried to exemplify that for a really long time, I don't know. I've never myself been in, an autopsy lab or something like that. And I have been around dead bodies. When I was 15 years old, I lost 3 friends in the course of 6 months, kids my age. And I remember being around, those were probably, other than I think I had a great aunt that died when I was really little. That was the first time I was ever around a dead body. And you feel something, even though it's still a person or whatever, it, and but the person's not there anymore, however you want to put it, it's still, you recognize that their life is gone and it's over, and there
Mm.
is that connection there. So as much as you try to, feel this way about the good death, or being able to talk about it once you're actually face to face with it, it feels like it would be harder to kind of take on.
Yeah, and it was something that I did not expect to be hit so hard about, because I was raised very religious, and at this time that I went to the autopsy, I was still Christian, like evangelical Christian. Um, but I had never, like, I had family members die and stuff, and I was in that cadaver lab in undergrad, but it just never hit me that this is real, like that this
Mhm.
is the reality of death. Like, it's not just something that you just keep in the back of your mind. You don't think about like, oh yeah, this person died, like they're in a better place now, or they're in a worse place. Like, you don't think about it. You're just like, yeah, death is something I don't have to worry about right now. But then when you see it, like, this is reality. This is what death looks like. And it's like, there's just something within our human psychology where you recognize that this is universal for
Mhm.
everybody. Like, everybody is going to experience this, and no one can escape it. And it's very raw, and it's very, like, it's just very difficult to handle, I think, for anybody, and especially not having been taught that it's natural.
Mhm.
Like, and it's just so much different than the religious community especially makes it out to be. And I think when they talk about death, like, I question if the majority of them have even like experienced the reality of death, like beyond like a funeral where someone's been dressed up and like they're making it a big thing.
Well, I was just about
But
to mention that the way that the funeral industry
mm,
is, especially in America, they completely separate that out. They give this illusion that, your loved one dies, you hand them over to a funeral home, and for the most part, they will be made up and they will be embalmed, and everything will look
mm,
like they're just restfully, peacefully sleeping. Whereas you having to, have to actually deal with dead bodies as a medical student that's actually being involved
mm,
with seeing it as death itself. Do you
yeah.
feel that that the way that it's handled, because they make it almost like it's not real, do you think that kind of it serves as a detriment to people, because you are kind of disillusioning the whole system and making it as if it's magic? Like, yes, they're fine, they're just asleep, instead of actually facing the real reality of death itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is denial, especially within religious services related to it. I think a lot of it is denial.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing, Caitlin, again, I'll talk about Caitlin Doty. She likes the idea of families actually bring their loved ones home and taking care of the body before the funeral, washing it, dressing it, that kind of stuff, doing it themselves, so they're able to not only say goodbye to their loved one, but also, actually connect with death and see it face to face, and come, you
Mhm.
know, that this is real and this has happened, instead of kind of brushing it off and pretending everything's fine. And also, there's that other aspect too with the religious, that, oh, well, they're just in a better place, we'll see them again. How does that make you feel when you hear that?
I think they're just disconnected from reality. Like, because you're not going to see them again.
Mhm.
Like, and I mean, I'm not religious anymore, obviously. And I don't think people who believe that there is an afterlife, I don't think they have any grounds to go off of to like prove that it is the case.
Mhm.
So, and like, it's just grasping at straws and not letting people make the most out of their lives now. And also it's making people live very as if they're invincible. Like, especially I think a lot of religious people, And we're seeing this right now with the pandemic is that a lot of religious people feel invincible, and they think death doesn't happen to them because they have this supernatural intervention that's gonna like protect them if they need to be protected. And then like if it's their time, then it's just what God planned, and then that's whatever. And then so people live very recklessly.
Well, how many
And
people did you hear at one point saying, "Oh, I don't need, masks or whatever. I won't have to worry about the vaccine because I have the blood of Christ protecting me."
so many people. And I
That
think
was
if people,
fucking insane. But then even
yeah,
when they do die, they give that excuse to, well, that was God's will, and I'll be fine anyway because I'll be
and
taking. It's
it
so
obviously
reckless.
wasn't you making stupid decisions, and it
Yeah.
wasn't you facing the consequences of your actions or
What if God
consequences
had
of
the
somebody else's
vaccine,
actions.
invented because he wants you to get the fucking vaccine? Why not think that way instead of like
Yeah.
literally just I'll do nothing and God will protect me? It's such an insane way to think.
Yeah, it's people have a lot of denial surrounding death, and I do wish that our society did a better job exposing people and talking about it at a younger age, like knowing that this person's going to be gone, you're not going to see them again. Like so
Mhm.
maybe build relationships while they're alive. Like don't just put things
Yeah.
off until someone's about to die. Maybe like don't take any of this for granted because it's going to happen to all of us. And like seeing these
Recognize.
people at the morgue, like this 19-year-old, like the biggest thing that caused me to have this kind of existential crisis, and I had this crisis for a long time afterwards. It was the first time seeing somebody dead who is younger than me, and it flipped a switch of you are not invincible. Like this person, like granted our situations were different, and I don't know what circumstances led to her making those decisions, but just knowing that, like, because even if it's a drug overdose, like I could have made the same choice. Like what happened to where I made different choices than she did, and like why did she have to have these consequences and I didn't? Like something, I mean, I was raised in a household with a decent amount of money. Like I didn't have to really worry about a lot of things. Like I didn't have any like health history, like no health issues that would have caused things to go a different way. And so it's kind of the luck of the draw in a sense. Like because I very easily could have been the one on that table.
Yeah.
And you just don't know.
Being able to recognize that this is the only life that we have. I think it's also doing a disservice to children when you give the answer, "Oh, you'll see grandma again in heaven," or whatever, because then they'll hold on to that and have that belief. And yes, there's the argument that it can be a comfort to some people, but is it really in the end doing that much good, or is it making them see that what happens in this life doesn't really matter because there's more beyond? That is what worries me, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. And like these actions, like it's not only about you, like it's about other people as well. Like one of the other people in this morgue, because I said there were 3 bodies. There's the one that we did the autopsy on, who was the 19-year-old girl, and then another one was in a fatal car accident. And he looked middle-aged, and he was still in a position where his hand was out as if he was grabbing something, probably the steering wheel. And we actually found his obituary in the newspaper a couple days later. At least my friend did, who went to the autopsy with me, and he was like reading the newspaper and found this and was like, "This person looks familiar," and then realized that was one of our bodies.
Well, then you connect it even more because then you have to think about their life and everything too.
Yeah, and that's another thing with these autopsies, the fact that these people, like, they have a name attached to them, they have a story attached to them. Like that, the 19-year-old on the table, she, like, in doing the autopsy, like you learn a lot about this person and how they died. Like this woman had probably at least 1 coat hanger abortion. because
Wow.
you saw scarring on her cervix that shouldn't have been there.
I was gonna say not just how they died, but you see how they lived. Everything.
Yeah.
You're literally cutting a person open. It's how intimate can you possibly get with another human being other than to see what they lived like that. Yeah, that's so sad. I think about like, those bodies exhibits, where they plasticize the bodies and they kind of flay them open. A lot of those are executed Chinese prisoners. You can actually still see the bullet holes in them. And it's really like, as cool as I think that art is, you realize that these people didn't choose to become art. They also didn't choose to die this way. And it's really hard to because, when you actually take a second to see that, oh, this is a human being, look, there's that bullet hole. Then you think about the fear they must have had before they died and everything like that. Connecting it to an actual human being is so much harder, but I think that's also important, to be able to say, yes, this was a person and had autonomy and, feelings and loved ones and everything like that. So you said that death kind of helped you with your deconversion. Was that, when you were a medical student, or did this happen before?
This was before. This was at the autopsy.
So it was the 19-year-old?
It was the 19-year-old. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was it specifically.
Yeah, it was her, and I needed a lot of therapy after that because I just finally came to terms with the fact that like this was real, and like it's gonna be me one day. It's gonna be everyone I know one day, and like it just put me in this weird place of like it was an existential crisis. Like what are we even doing? Like if this is the end result, like if we're all gonna end up here, what are we doing with all of this time? And just trying to iron out like what even is life? Like what do I want to do with the time that I have? And like it made me realize that there isn't a lot of time. And like so maybe all of this is incidental. Like there's no reason why this woman had to die this way. It just happened that way. And it sucks. But like I think that's the only thing that made sense. Like I couldn't chalk this up to something spiritual. I couldn't rationalize it, and I don't think anyone should need to. Just like understand that this is unfortunate and this is just how it is.
I think when that's something also that religion gets wrong about death, because they try to push the idea, well, it was God had a reason for this. Like I fucking hate it when children die and you hear that bullshit, like trite, oh, God wanted to call up an angel fucking excuse, and I want to punch a motherfucker in the face because like I don't know if I've ever actually said this. Yeah, I think I might have, but I had an ectopic pregnancy. I don't know, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And so it was obviously a child that I had wanted and lost, and also almost died because of. That was something that my mother had said to me. Oh well, not that specifically, but she had mentioned, oh well, your child is up in heaven and you'll get to see them again someday, and God wanted them back or whatever. Like, knowing full well that I was an atheist anyway, it was not, that didn't fucking feel good. I don't, and why would I accept that? Why would I think, oh, okay, well, I don't get to have this child I wanted because fucking God wanted, like, that makes no sense at all. And why should I accept that or be okay with that? I think that's a horrible thing to tell people.
Yeah, I actually have an experience like that as well. When I used to be an EMT for 911 in Colorado Springs, and like it's a very busy system, and you get all kinds of crazy calls. But I did end up responding to a pediatric cardiac arrest one day, and it was a 5-month-old baby. And it was nothing that really could have been prevented. in any way. No one messed up. This baby was breastfeeding and aspirated, and that's something that's common. Like, if the baby chokes a little bit and like can't clear anything out, they can choke and die.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. Like, nobody was at fault. Nothing could have been done, but we did not get that baby back. And we had to tell a mom of 2 or 3 kids already. So I don't know if this was baby number 3 or baby number 4. But having to tell a mom that her baby is dead and that you can't
Yeah.
get the baby back. And then knowing that these other children lost a sibling and they're so young, they probably don't understand what happened. And then we have to go back and I worked for AMR at the time, and they were so busy, and they would just make you run calls all day. And we didn't even get a break before we had to go run another call. Like, we put our ambulance back together. We don't even get time to process what just happened, but we're getting called to something else, and we got to go do that job. But like, it hits you, and you take a minute to just like I understand where the denial comes from, because there's just like this period of time where you just can't process what happened.
Yeah.
Like, is this real? I feel like it's not real, but it is.
No, it is, especially when it's a child. It's just not natural for a parent to lose a child. I know how stupid that sounds, but it's oh God. Angel was born sick and immediately needed to be intubated. And like they gave him to me I held him for 6 seconds before they took him off and, intubated him and put him in the incubator and all that stuff. And there were quite a few times within the next 3 months, because he was in the NICU for 3 months after that in 3 different hospitals, that, there was I don't know if he's going to get through this moment. And I cannot imagine anything scarier in the world than that. And it's awful. So I can imagine wanting to fall back on the idea that, yes, I would see him again or whatever. But I just don't think that's very helpful in telling somebody that they will, and saying it's going to be fine, because if that's something that you want to believe personally, but telling somebody else you'll be fine, that's what God wanted, or you'll see them again, that is just never going to be helpful. I'm sorry.
Absolutely not. I get where the denial is coming from, but I don't think people should fall back on that for anything. Like, we know with psychology that it's healthy to grieve and to feel all of those emotions about losing somebody. That's natural. But like, hiding those feelings, like suppressing them because they're going to see them again, is extremely unhealthy. And like, I mean, I'm sure not a lot of people end up deconverting, but like the ones that do, they end up having to grieve a second time because they didn't grieve enough the first time. Like, they didn't actually grieve, and now they are grieving. And then you have regret of why didn't I like do better for this person? Like, I don't know, it's so much worse, I think, than just dealing with the emotions as they come and letting yourself feel all of it.
It was actually where I was just about to go, because you know how there just seems to be, cultures seem to grieve in different ways, and some, I can't remember. It was 6 Feet Under. Have you ever seen the show 6 Feet Under? If you haven't,
no, I haven't.
It's so good. It's about a family that runs a funeral home, and it's all basically dealing with, death, and it's really good. But anyway, they're going by this Italian family that is grieving, and the woman is literally like throwing herself on the coffin, and they're wailing, and they're actually expressing themselves. And they had just been to a funeral, or they were talking about this at the funeral of their own father, where like it's all very, everything's in plastic. They even when they put the dirt on the body, or on the coffin, they use a little salt shaker instead of using their hands. Like they're trying to make it as, clean and, just holding everything in as possible. And how healthy can that really be? But it depends, I guess, on how you were raised or what you believe, but eventually those feelings are going to catch up to you whether or not you express them. So it's kind of a sad situation when you have people that just feel they cannot express their grief in any way possible. It's hard because that's just not how people are built. Death is hard. Yes, it's part of life, but something that we have to be able to deal with and move on from, or else we're going to carry it forever if we don't actually feel it.
Yeah. And that was something like in learning how to handle death, especially that one 19-year-old, that was the one that really did everything for me. But just like constantly having thoughts about death and like what happens like if someone I know dies, or like it just, when you haven't learned how to cope with something like that,
You fear it more.
like you fear, you fear it all the time. Like it would just consume my thoughts of like, why am I even doing any of this, because death is just going to happen.
Yeah,
And
repressing it really does make it, worse for you, because you end up like not actually facing it and being able to talk about it, or the stigma around it that keeps us from talking about it or dealing with it in any way just makes us more afraid of it. Because what are we most afraid of? Stuff that we don't know and don't understand. So of course, when we, the only time that some people ever face death at all or ever talk about it at all is when it's actually affecting them. Someone in their family passes or whatever. And that's the worst possible time for you to try to cope with your feelings about death, though, because you're already grieving. So it's better, to be able to understand it and have just be able to talk to people about it and not be super duper afraid before it happens. Have you had to, I know you haven't been working too long in the hospital, but have you had to give any death notices at all to family members?
No, not actual, like you're going to die.
No, I
Something
mean
happened.
like when someone has died, telling their family members that, I'm sorry, but
no, not in the hospital. I haven't. Something that, and this is kind of along those lines, but like, I mean, earlier on in the process. So like starting off in internal medicine, like there's so much going on all the time. And sometimes like it's been a process for me to learn how to kind of connect the clinical data with like this being an actual person. And like, I forget sometimes that these people that are in the hospital, like this is for a lot of them, like the worst day of their life, or like one of the worst days of their life. Like they're going through a lot of anxiety, like they have this big medical emergency, like, and that's what it is to them. Like it is an emergency is why they're there. Whereas like the hospital is a part of my everyday life. I'm there all the time. It's a lot of math to me. Like it's numbers. I see numbers, I see cases. And so there's this weird emotional disconnect between us. Cause like my emotions while I'm at the hospital are usually just like, oh, I'm hungry, or I haven't peed in how many hours. Like I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep well last night, like typical work stress. Whereas on the other side, my patients, their stress is like, am I okay? Like, am I bleeding to death? Like, I can't breathe right now. Like, my family can't come visit me. And this was actually one, oh man, this wasn't my patient. This was my classmate's patient. So with COVID, you can't, at least at this hospital, you can only have one visitor at a time.
Yeah, for a while you couldn't have any at our hospital, because I had a couple surgeries last year where I couldn't have anybody come in. So But
Yeah,
yeah.
so this woman flies from, I don't remember what state she was coming from, but her mom was in the hospital with, I don't remember what the diagnosis was. But this daughter flew in to be able to see her mom, and they wouldn't let her in because they already had another visitor. And this patient died overnight. Like, we get there for rounds the next day. Like, we're in the conference room with our attending, like he's going over the cases, and he calls the name of the patient, and my classmate's like, yeah, that's mine. He's like, yeah, she died last night. And the daughter couldn't visit because they would only allow one visitor at a time. So this woman like didn't get to see her mom for the last time.
It's horrible. Do you feel like, that you have to have a certain amount of separation between the awful shit that you see just to keep yourself composed, but then you have, obviously you'll have moments that'll hit you harder than others, and you cannot keep up that wall for ever. Is it like that sometimes?
Yeah, I'm learning a lot about this right now, and this is a challenge that I'm kind of embracing moving forward into medicine, especially with this being really my first time stepping into a doctor's role in real life. That balance of empathy and distance is really important, because you need both to be a good doctor. You need to be able to empathize with somebody. You need to be able to understand what their concerns are. You need to be able to talk to somebody. And so that's very important, to have empathy. But I'm learning that empathy can cause you to make a lot of clinical mistakes. And like, because I've noticed this with myself even, and I know other med students and doctors have issues learning this as well, where you kind of bond with somebody and you don't want to inconvenience them. You don't want to put them through pain. You don't want to do any more than you have to. And so like, even this is something small, but like, you have multiple doctors seeing one patient like every day, like especially if they have specialists on board. Like if someone's in the ICU, they've got their intensivist that's doing everything they need to do. They have the regular internal medicine doc who also needs to be on board, just in case they get moved off of ICU, because they make that decision together a lot of times. You have like any specialist, like if you have a cardiologist or you have a pulmonologist, they all come in and bug you. And so you get in your head, you're like, okay, well, I've seen this person before. Do I need to do a thorough exam today? Do I need to make them like get out of bed? Like,
yeah,
do I need to put them through this? And like you kind of give yourself excuses, like, I don't want to inconvenience this person, so I'm not gonna do it today. Like I'm gonna let them rest. But then you realize, like, I was actually reading like a story from another doctor like a long time ago, who he had that thought process, and the fact that he wasn't as thorough that day, he missed something important. Like somebody had cancer that needed to be diagnosed, and he decided like he didn't want to inconvenience his patient that day, so he was not as thorough as he should have been. And so that is a point where you do need to put the empathy on the back burner a little bit and say, okay, is the empathy more important right now than doing my job? Like, what do I need to do to cover all of my bases and make sure that I'm not missing anything important? Because I would rather somebody be uncomfortable for a few minutes than dead.
Yeah. And plus you can't like feel, if you felt everything full on all the time, that, if something happens with one patient and you lose it over it, your next patient is going to be affected. I, in my line of work, all of my death comes with data. So I, at the very least, don't have to see it face to face, because we get our data about the endangered species that we're working on, their population numbers, and we work through that. And we also, it's about seeing what will happen with, it doesn't matter anyway, but it's still, like this year alone, I've lost 2 species that we've worked with. They're extinct now. And it is, even in the numbers, I know how hard it is. And you have to just plugging in the data and seeing the amount of death that is involved, you have to kind of just look beyond it as best you can, because if you sit there and you think about it and you really, really allow yourself to feel everything about it, there's just no fucking way to work that way. It just can't. But then, every once in a while, like when I find out I've lost a species, or if the data just looks really, really bad, it's so hard, and you cannot help but it will affect you. It hurts. And I can't imagine having to be face to face with actual humans that are dying, or having to deal with death. It must be so very, very hard to compose yourself and keep yourself strong to be able to help them around it.
Yeah, this one patient, which this was kind of like the irony, was that this is on the day of the pray away atheism or whatever the fuck it was. I was like, while that event was going on, I was in a patient's room, and this was a patient that I admitted from the emergency department. So I saw them like when they came into the emergency department. I saw them the next day, and they were definitely getting a lot worse. This is like a man in his 80s or something, with congestive heart failure, and he threw a pulmonary embolism, so he had a blood clot in his lungs, and that was like kind of the main reason that put him in the hospital this time. Which the PE was being resolved, like we were working on that, but his mental status was rapidly deteriorating. So like in the emergency department, like he was dozing off occasionally, but he was for the most part able to answer questions. He knew what was going on, like he knew where he was, everything that was happening. But then the next day when I saw him, he was very irritable. He didn't know what year it was anymore. Like he didn't know what was going on. He knew who he was and that he was at the hospital, but that's all that he knew. And so his condition was not great. And being so new to this field, like I was in clinical mode a little bit. I was thinking through what I need to do, like to treat this patient, like what labs I need to go look at, like everything that's going on. It didn't click for a second that like I needed to connect some dots, that like this was not a good situation, and that like things were getting worse. And it didn't click for me until his wife starts crying.
Oh.
And so I pause, and like I ask her like what's going on, like if everything is okay, and she starts talking about how like, because I guess being so young as well, I don't have any concept of like these long lasting marriages, and like having someone that you're both not going to live forever. Like if you're in your 80s, like it's going to happen at some point in the near future. But having her crying because she's been married to this man for like over 60 years, and she's hoping to get a few more years with him. Like she said, I was just hoping that I would get a few more years. And she was crying because she didn't believe that they were gonna make it out of this situation. And I don't know the answer of how he's doing or what happened with that, because he actually got moved off of my attending service to a different doctor's service. I saw him the next day, like just from outside his door. Like, so I knew he made it through that night. But I don't know how he's doing now, what has happened with that. But I just like being in the room with somebody who is convinced that their spouse might die, and then knowing that it is a realistic possibility. Like, and I obviously I don't know if it happened or not, but not being able to say for sure if it was going to happen.
Their life as well. Like it's not just the patient you're losing, but the ripple effect with everybody around them. It's That can't
Yeah,
be
and the
easy.
fact that these Christians were praying to end atheism at this exact moment that I was having that conversation. It's like our priorities are whack if
Mhm.
ending atheism is more important to God than
Yeah.
being there for this woman whose husband is dying. Like, and
Yeah.
we have this weird stigma in medicine too, especially related to elderly people. Like there's a lot of ageism in medicine. You find a lot of doctors don't want to treat old people because they think it's a waste of time. So they're like, oh, well, these old people are gonna die anyway, so like, why does it matter? And then we forget that like these are people.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're old and they don't have that much time left, but they're still people. You still got to treat them like you treat anybody else. They still have emotions. They still have fears.
Yeah.
Like it's sure they know that it's the end of the road for them, but that
But that
doesn't
means they
mean
should
that,
get more comfort almost. My
yeah.
mother, she was a nurse, and when I was really young, I used to spend parts of my summers volunteering at the nursing home she worked at. So I would go in and basically I would spend the day in the rec room, like making people coffee or playing board games with them or whatever. Just like, I don't know, they always were so excited when I was probably like 10 years old at the time, between 10 and 12. And they were always excited to see, a young face come in and be paid attention to and have somebody give a shit. I think even back then I noticed that it, yes, they're old. It's not really fair to not give as much care to them just because, yeah, there may not be that much you can do, but they're still human beings. They still
Mhm.
deserve to be cared for and loved. And that whole thing with COVID. Remember last year when they were basically
Yeah.
saying we should just sacrifice the old people for everybody else? It's like fucking what?
What if you
We
were
have
that old person? You wouldn't say that if that
yeah.
was you.
And I get that maybe once upon a time, there just wasn't we didn't have the medicine or the resources or anything like that to be able to take care of our older generations. But we are at the point where we have in society the technology that we need, the money that is necessary if we actually put it into the system. Nobody needs to suffer or be neglected that way, but they see it as a waste anyway, and that's just despicable.
Well, and the fact that like the priority here for them is like, let's sacrifice the old people because I don't want to wear a mask when I go to Walmart.
Yeah, that is
Like, is that really like you're willing to sacrifice a human being, multiple, like potential millions of human beings because you don't want to wear a mask? Like, I think
yeah.
that's absolutely ridiculous. And like, especially from people who like claim to be pro-life. Like, yeah, you're pro-life until you have to put a piece of cloth over your face. Like, how pro-life are you?
They're never pro-life, they're just
They're
pro-birth.
never pro.
So I was
Yep.
gonna like I keep thinking about one of the reasons, like obviously I think it's super cool, you being a med student and all, like a lot of my friends from college, from undergrad, ended up doctors because as I was telling you before the show, I lived in an honors dorm for a while. So the floors around me were mostly engineering and physics kids, but we had a few pre-med kids sprinkled in, and I ended
Mhm.
up friends with a lot of them, and I know just how much work it is. But to be a medical student in the time of COVID, okay, I cannot imagine what you have been through, how frightening this has been for you. Do you want to talk about that at all?
It's been it hasn't been super frightening. It's just been more frustrating than anything because um I mean, doctors really aren't as respected anymore because of the internet, and people go to the internet for everything now.
Mhm.
But I mean, we knew that, but now it's even more so. Like,
Well, also there's that, especially over the past 4 years, that there's that huge fight against science and education
mhm,
coming from the right for some fucking reason. So, where we should be respecting the scientists, and I've always said doctors are scientists to me, respect the people that know what the fuck they're talking about. And
mhm.
what the last administration did took a lot of that away, and that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, the death of expertise is something that I have like it's a huge pet peeve of mine because like it's Dunning-Kruger. You don't know what you don't know. And like if you I think undergrad institutions can even be better about this, and high schools can be better about emphasizing the fact that what you learn at a high school level and at an undergrad level is simplified. It is not an expert level of material. So even if you've studied something like if you took intro to chemistry in college, like it's simplified. It's not all of the information you need to be a chemist. Same thing, like if you took anatomy in high school, you're not capable of being a doctor. You have more work that you need to do. And so like people like, I took biology. Like, you took really, really simplified biology. And I'm not discounting the fact that you learned a few good things, but you haven't learned a complete picture. You've built a little bit of the jigsaw puzzle, but there's so much more of the puzzle that you need to put together. And that's what these experts have done. They've put in the time to fit these pieces together beyond what other people have done. And so it bugs me a little bit to see all of that. And then there's been this stupid joke that, like, I mean, this might be a little silly of me to get mad over, but the fact that doctors are just like being trash talked all the time now. Like none of us chose to go to medical school during the pandemic. Like none of us did. But there's this assumption that, like in this joke, that like we don't go to hospitals like after this is over because all the med students who are becoming doctors went to online medical school. Like, no. And also, okay, here's my number one argument against that is that none of us went to class anyway. And so a lot of med schools, at least mine, lectures are optional for the most part. And so like they will record lectures and post them online, but there's like the volume of information you have to know in your first 2 years of medical school is absolutely insane.
Yeah,
like and you're tested. We had like 10 exams a month near the end of my second year of med school, and we had boards on top of that. So like you're doing 2 exams a week and you have about 15 lecture hours per exam. And when we're saying like 15 lecture hours, like you have slides that are packed. Like there's no space on that slide. And all of it's like, if you take into account the fact that we have, in order to be in medical school, you already have a bachelor's degree, usually in biology or chemistry. So you've taken 4 years of science. And so they assume you already know that. So this material that's crammed onto these slides is all the new stuff that you haven't learned yet. Like it's all the nuance and stuff. And so it's a lot. So there's no way that like a lot of people can learn all of that and go to lectures. Like, so you end up teaching yourself a lot of it from the slides. You end up finding whatever way works best for you to learn and you do it. So none of us really ever did go to class. So we're in just as good of a spot as the previous generations of doctors. And saying that like we're not putting in the same work is just really insulting. Because also the fact that this has been put on us to like, we have to deal with a pandemic, like we have to deal with educating the public. We have to deal with like not being around each other. Like we lost camaraderie with a lot of our classmates because you couldn't be around each other. And so it's just very insulting. People who have never spent a day in medical school, like have never done the work that I've had to do to get to where I am, saying like, oh, well, you're just not as good because like you did some online classes.
So
like,
dumb.
It was not my choice. And we are working just as hard and learning the same information and are going to be just as good of doctors. So like, I hate hearing that.
I'm curious, just like, how do you feel that is the correct way to teach what you guys learn? The actual, just the volumes of things that you need to kind of memorize and learn in such a short amount of time. Do you think that they do that for a reason, and does that actually work?
I think 4 years is too short. Like, and granted, you're not like, they say you don't learn medicine really until your first year of residency. So your internship, like your residency is when you really learn medicine, because everything up to that point is foundational material. Like it's the stuff that you need to know to be able to practice medicine, but the actual learning medicine is you putting the pieces together, figuring out how to critically think about it. But it is way too much information to cram into 2 because you're doing all of your lectures in 2 years. And then like first 2 years are didactic, second 2 years are clinical rotations, and then you go on your residency. So you're cramming a lot into 2 years, and don't think it is enough time. I think we need more time to spread it out, let you digest the material a little bit, like, and not just have to like spit things out for an exam. And it's ineffective and it's exhausting, and you don't remember things anyway like that. And also just the level of expectations is insane, because like you're having these board exams, and like you're graded on a percentile, which is necessary because you're averaging, like everyone's averaging about 50% correct on most things. Like I think the 50th percentile is like what, 60 to 66% of the questions correct on the boards. So like that's abysmal if you're thinking about grades. So they grade you on a percentile because the information they're testing you on is impossible to learn in that amount of time.
Well, and plus the thing is too, and they've shown this, that it, when you cram, you don't keep that information in.
Yeah.
So when you're just, I remember having to do that I had certain semesters that I would have, because I double majored in astronomy and physics that's how you get a bachelor's in astrophysics. So I would have 2 physics classes, 2, math classes, and an astronomy class in one semester. And just the amount of stuff that we have to remember, from 1 week to the next. 2 weeks later, after spending 8 hours in a night cramming for it, I don't fucking remember it 2 weeks later, because you're almost like dump it out of your head for the next one. But in terms of, people that seem to have so much less respect for people who have actually taken the time to get educated in something, everybody feels that they're these, I don't think keyboard warriors is the right word exactly, but everybody feels like they've got all this Google foo that, hey, if I look up something online, well, I'm automatically an expert. And I argued with somebody about how climate change wasn't anthropogenic because something about the shifting of the tilt of the axis of the Earth, and I'm like, okay, and I'm trying very hard to kindly and nicely explain to them why they're wrong, and they're no, this and that. I'm like, I literally have degrees in both astrophysics and climate. Can you just shut the fuck up for 1 minute and listen to what I'm saying? You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's so very, very hard sometimes, because a lot of people just don't care anymore. And especially when you have an entire side of our country, tossing out all respect for authority and education and things like that. It's difficult, to say the least.
Actually, it was funny because in my previous relationship, I snuck my girlfriend at the time into one of my neuro classes, and she was like going for nursing and stuff. I was like, it's gonna be fun. Like, I like neuro. I bring her into a one hour class, and she leaves and she's like, what the fuck was that? I'm like, yeah, we do this for like 8 hours a day, like that amount of content. And I remember like my second day of medical school, I was like, my brain is fried. And like, you just can't think anymore.
My freshman year roommate, we had 2 roommates my freshman year, and one of them was, her major was fucking costume design. Okay.
Costume design majors are legit, but in artistic ways. I used to be a theater major.
I'm not saying that, but like, I'm sorry, the amount of time that I had to put into my work she'd come home because she used to work at, they had to do like apprenticeship work building sets for one of the plays during the year, and she would come home complaining about having done that for a few hours. And I've literally been sitting there, like neck deep in like three-dimensional calculus or something for like a bunch of hours. My brain is falling out of my nose. Oh, I'm so tired of all the people, changing sets and stuff. I just think I don't understand how they figure every single major should fit into the same time frame. Like,
Yeah.
not all majors need 4 years. Some majors need more, but cramming everything into a certain amount of time just because that's the time frame they set. It's very weird. Anyway, that was a super weird tangent. I am sorry about that, but
it's a great tangent.
It's always tangents on this channel. But so, anything coming up on your channel or your Twitch? And I forgot, I didn't put your Twitch in. I will make sure to fix that.
Oh, you're good.
Description after.
Not a whole lot's coming up. I've been dialing back a little bit because of rotations, and obviously that's a priority right now. So I kind of have my videos on my YouTube on a scheduled release because I didn't know what my schedule was going to be. So I just recorded a bunch of stuff and I'm releasing them slowly. So I release Mondays and Fridays right now. And if I have a goofy, like I had a stupid couple videos about like a weird med Twitter debate. That was just kind of a goofy video because I am of the opinion that otoscope lights are better than pen lights, and I will stick to that forever. That's
adorable.
If I have a stupid video like that, I'll release that on Wednesdays, but I don't often have those. But I think, I don't know, I'm going to end up doing more debunk videos as well. So I need to figure out how I'm going to do this, but I might pick like Monday for like a science video and like Friday for a debunk video. So I don't know.
When is you and B's stream? You said Beers with Bros, right? I get that.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. We do
is that
Beers
like a
Bros.
Scheduled thing or just whenever?
That is on Fridays if we're both available after the shills. So the shills do their like pub chat of things that are pub chat on Fridays, and then we just meet up after that on the Twitch and we just chat about
on the
stupid
Twitch.
things. The Twitch. Yeah.
That was funny. Okay. So that's on, but your Twitch channel?
Yeah, it's on my Twitch.
Okay, cool. So Friday, and like I said, I'll make sure I put that in. Awesome. Okay. Do you have any last words about our discussion tonight or anything at all?
I liked having this discussion with you. I think I'd love to do more chats with you about sciencey things.
I am always up for sciencey chats anytime. Yeah, think about whatever topic you'd like to do next, and we're welcome on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great time.
I'm super glad. Like, I'm glad. I know it's a strange topic, so let's talk about death, and some people are very put off by it. But pretty much my favorite edited video that I did on this channel was about the sustainable funeral industry. Just being able to talk about it, it's okay, and I also think it's important. And I think it's important to when it comes to like climate as well, because being able to connect ourselves with the fact that our life does end, and so is our the other species on our planet and what we're doing to it as well. Being able to kind of see a connection between the two so that we can actually do something about climate change is important to me as well. And yes, Stool, someday we will get you a curry dead body. Awesome.
I think I missed that comment.
He really wants curry, apparently. So
I'll do a curry stream one of these days.
We'll get you your curry, Stool, we promise. But no, thank you for coming on. And we've only known each other a little over a month, but I really do love having you around and enjoy your company. So thanks for being a good friend, Ben. Really.
Yeah, thanks for having me.